Have you ever noticed how loneliness seems to slip into the room at night? It's as if it's been waiting all day, watching you from the corners while you're busy with work, errands, and conversations you barely remember. And then, when the lights go out and the noise fades, it finally steps forward. There's a particular stillness after midnight that doesn't just surround you, it seeps into you. And in that stillness, the truth you've been avoiding all day suddenly becomes impossible to ignore. During the day, your mind is flooded with distractions. You're responding to emails, talking to coworkers, thinking about dinner, maybe laughing at a joke that didn't really make you laugh inside. You're surrounded by movement, cars passing, people talking, music playing in cafes, and it creates the illusion that you are connected, that you belong. But night is different. Night strips away the noise, and with it, the thin layers you've been using to cover what you feel. What's left is just you, the quiet and the echo of your own thoughts. There's a reason loneliness feels heavier in those hours. Psychologists call it emotional amplification. When external stimulation is low, your brain naturally tunes inward, magnifying whatever emotions are already there. If there's emptiness, it feels deeper. If there's longing, it feels sharper. If there's regret, it feels heavier. And unlike the daytime, you can't easily drown it in distractions. I remember speaking to someone once, a man in his late 40s, divorced for 3 years. He told me that his hardest moments weren't holidays or birthdays, but Tuesday nights at 11 p.m. He said, "That's when the house feels the loudest, even though it's silent. That's when I notice the space on the other side of the bed." That's the thing about nighttime loneliness. It's not just about who's missing. It's about the conversations that never happen, the laughter you can't hear, the presence you can't feel. Biology plays its part too. Our circadian rhythms are designed to wind us down at night. The body slows, melatonin rises, and without the day's adrenaline, there's less to shield you from your inner world. The darkness itself becomes a signal to the mind. This is the time for reflection. And reflection is where loneliness often finds its voice. In evolutionary history, our ancestors gathered at night for warmth and safety. Being alone in the dark could mean danger. Even now, that ancient imprint lingers. Solitude at night feels different because, deep down, it's coded as unnatural. There's also the weight of contrast. By day, you might speak to strangers, exchange smiles, hear laughter in the distance. These micro moments of connection, however small, feed your nervous system tiny doses of belonging. But at night, those threads are cut. You check your phone, no new messages. You scroll. Everyone else seems to be somewhere, with someone. And even if you know social media is a highlight reel, it still feeds the story your loneliness is telling. You are on the outside, looking in. Some people try to escape it. They binge shows until 2 a.m., text people they barely know, or drown in endless feeds. Not because they're entertained, but because they're avoiding the silence. Others surrender to it, lying in bed with their eyes open, feeling the minutes drip like water from a leaky faucet. Either way, night has a way of slowing time, so that loneliness can stretch itself out, filling every corner. And then there's the memory factor. Night is when unresolved emotions knock on the door. You think about the friend you haven't heard from in months, the relationship that ended without closure, the family member you wish you could call. These thoughts don't just arrive, they replay, like scenes on a loop, making the absence feel fresh again. This is why some people cry more easily at night. The world is quieter, and the walls between past and present grow thinner. But here's a truth that's harder to accept. Loneliness at night can also be a teacher. In those raw hours, you see yourself without the masks you wear in daylight. You see the connections you've outgrown, the places you've been undervalued, the ways you've settled for being half seen. That clarity is painful, but it's also a map. If you trace it honestly, it can show you where you need to go next. I once spoke with a young woman who had recently moved to a new city. She told me she dreaded nighttime, not because she was afraid of the dark, but because it reminded her of the distance between the life she had and the life she wanted. But over time, she started using those hours differently. She wrote letters to herself, made small plans for the week ahead, and reached out to just one person each night, not to fill the void instantly, but to slowly build a web of real connection. Months later, she said something that stayed with me. "The night still feels quiet, but it doesn't feel empty anymore." If the quiet hours weigh heavy on you, know this. The goal isn't to erase them. You don't have to turn night into day, or loneliness into constant company. You can let it be what it is, a signal, a mirror, a reminder that your need for connection is not weakness but humanity. In fact, learning to sit with yourself in those moments without trying to numb or escape can transform them. The silence that once felt hostile can become a kind of refuge, a place where you hear your truest voice. Because in the end, night doesn't create your loneliness, it simply uncovers it. And while that can hurt, it also means the answers you're looking for are already within you, waiting in the quiet until you're ready to listen. There's an image I can't forget, one that came from a conversation with a friend years ago. She described lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, and feeling as if the air itself had weight. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint traffic outside, even the sound of her own breathing, everything felt amplified, like the universe was pressing its ear against her life to listen in. "That's when I realize how quiet my phone is," she told me, "and how much I wish it wasn't." What she was describing is something psychologists call perceived social isolation. It's not about the actual number of people in your life. It's about the gap between the connection you want and the connection you feel you have. That gap is a kind of emotional gravity. During the day, you can float above it, distracted by responsibilities and interactions, but at night, gravity wins. You sink into it. The mind has a peculiar way of filling the nighttime silence. It doesn't just sit still, it searches. It replays conversations, it reimagines what you could have said, it projects possible futures, and it sometimes even invents scenarios that never happened just to keep itself busy. And when you're already feeling lonely, this mental wandering tends to circle around the same themes: rejection, absence, longing. Each thought pulls you deeper into the feeling. There's also the factor of social comparison. In the day, you're more engaged in your own life. But at night, the barrier between your world and everyone else's becomes a thin screen, literally. You open Instagram or TikTok, and the feed offers an endless parade of people laughing together, sharing meals, falling in love. Your brain knows on some level that these moments are curated, but your emotions don't care about algorithms. They respond as if each post is a reminder of what you're missing. That's why the loneliness at night isn't just about being alone. It's about feeling left behind. Sometimes the hardest part isn't the absence of others, but the presence of your own unfiltered self. In daylight, you have roles: the worker, the friend, the parent, the student. Each role gives you a structure to lean on, but at night, those roles fall away, and you're left with the unmasked version of yourself. If that self feels uncertain, unfulfilled, or unseen, the quiet hours will magnify it. One of the more painful truths is that loneliness at night can make you question your own worth. You start to wonder if the lack of messages or calls is a reflection of who you are. Did you say something wrong? Are you not interesting enough? Have people moved on without you? These thoughts are rarely grounded in fact, but in the absence of other voices, your inner critic gets the microphone. I remember a story from a man in his 70s, widowed for over a decade. He said he had learned to keep his days full, volunteering, gardening, visiting the library. But at night, especially in winter when the darkness came early, the hours stretched unbearably long. "It's not just missing her," he said of his late wife. "It's missing the version of myself that existed when she was here." That's a different kind of loneliness, the grief for a self you no longer get to be. And it's one that tends to visit in the quietest hours. Our culture often treats loneliness as a problem to be solved quickly. Call a friend, join a group, distract yourself. But there's value in understanding its layers. At night, those layers become visible. There's the surface loneliness, wanting someone to talk to. Beneath that, there's a deeper layer, wanting to be understood. And deeper still, there's the existential layer, the awareness that no one can ever fully live inside your experience, that some part of you will always be yours alone. This last layer isn't something you can fix, but recognizing it can change the way you carry it. Some nights, the weight of loneliness feels like it might break you. But here's what I've learned from listening to countless stories. The quiet hours can also be a place of building. They can be where you notice the patterns you want to change, where you make peace with the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, where you start to imagine a life that feels more aligned with who you are. This doesn't happen in one night, or even in many, but it begins in the same place, sitting with what's real without turning away. I think of it like looking at the stars. They're always there, but you can't see them during the day. You need the darkness for them to appear. Loneliness, in its own strange way, can be like that. In the darkness, you see truths that daylight hides, and while those truths might ache, they also have the power to guide you, if you're willing to keep looking. If part of the pain of night is that it strips away the noise, then part of the potential of night is exactly the same thing. The quiet that exposes your loneliness is also the quiet that can make room for something new. But it takes a shift, a willingness to stop treating your loneliness like an intruder and start seeing it as a messenger. One woman I met, a painter in her early 30s, told me that she used to dread evenings. She would keep her TV on until she fell asleep, not because she wanted to watch, but because she couldn't bear the sound of her own apartment. It felt like the walls were breathing, she said, like the silence was alive and staring at me. But when she began therapy, her counselor gave her a challenge. Instead of drowning the silence, sit with it for 15 minutes each night. No distractions, just her, a cup of tea, and a sketchbook. At first, it was unbearable. Her mind screamed with restlessness, but slowly the silence began to shift. It became a space where she could notice what she truly felt. Sadness, yes, but also longing, ideas, and a quiet kind of strength. Over time, those 15 minutes turned into the most creative part of her day. I realized, she said, that I wasn't just lonely. I was hungry for connection, for meaning, for a life that felt more alive. This is what the quiet hours can offer: clarity. In the daytime rush, it's easy to confuse your true needs with temporary fixes, liking posts, replying to messages you don't care about, making small talk that leaves you emptier. But in the stillness of night, your real needs make themselves known. Maybe it's a deeper friendship. Maybe it's the courage to leave a job that drains you. Maybe it's simply the need to rest, not just your body, but your mind. Loneliness at night can also be a mirror for your relationship with yourself. If you feel uneasy in your own company, it's worth asking why. Are you harsh with yourself? Do you measure your worth only by how others see you? Do you fill your days so full that you never have to be alone with your thoughts? These are questions most people avoid, but night has a way of asking them for you. I remember a retired school teacher telling me about the shift she experienced after her husband passed away. The first year, she filled her evenings with volunteer work and visits to friends. She thought if she stayed busy enough, she could outrun the emptiness. But eventually, exhaustion caught up with her, and she found herself sitting in her living room at dusk, the house quiet for the first time in months. I started talking to myself, she said, not in a crazy way, just acknowledging that I was still here, that I was worth listening to. It was in those self-conversations that she began to write poetry, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. This doesn't mean that loneliness disappears when you make peace with it. Some nights will still feel heavier than others, but when you stop fighting the quiet, you open the possibility of transforming it. You start to see that the ache you feel is proof of your capacity to connect, to love, to care deeply. It's the same part of you that will recognize real connection when it comes. There's also a kind of discipline in facing loneliness head-on. It teaches you to anchor yourself without constant external validation. In a world that's always shouting for attention, the ability to sit in your own company and feel grounded is a quiet rebellion. It's a skill that protects you, not from needing others, but from depending on the wrong ones. And maybe that's the gift hidden in the hard truth. When night strips away the noise, you discover who you are when no one else is watching. You discover what you actually want your life to feel like. You might even realize that while the quiet hours can be lonely, they can also be deeply, unexpectedly alive. There's a paradox in the way night and loneliness meet. The very thing that makes the hours feel so heavy, the absence of noise, the stripping away of distractions, is also what can make them so honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, can be the first step toward change. I once spoke with a man in his 20s who had moved across the country for a new job. He told me that the hardest part wasn't the workload or even being far from his family. It was lying in bed at night, surrounded by the unfamiliar hum of a city that didn't yet feel like his. The days were fine, he said. I was busy, but at night, it was like the loneliness came in through the walls. He started a small ritual, lighting a candle before bed, playing one quiet song, and writing down 3 truths from his day. One about how he felt, one about what he learned, and one about what he hoped for tomorrow. It didn't erase the loneliness, he admitted, but it gave it shape. It wasn't just a fog anymore. That's what many people miss about loneliness. It's not always an enemy to be defeated. Sometimes it's a signal pointing to where something in your life is out of alignment. The quiet hours magnify that signal. They remind you that, despite the noise of the world, there's an inner voice you've been ignoring, And that voice doesn't always ask for more people or more plans. It might be asking for more authenticity, more meaning, more courage to be yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. The truth is, not all loneliness can or should be solved by filling the space. Some of it is meant to be felt, fully, so that you understand the shape of your own heart. If you rush to cover it up, you might miss what it's trying to tell you. That's why some of the most resilient people aren't the ones who never feel lonely. They're the ones who have learned how to walk through it without losing themselves. Night will always have its quiet hours. The world will always slow down at some point, and you will always be left with yourself. The question is not whether loneliness will visit you. It will. But what you do when it does. Do you turn away, or do you sit with it long enough to hear what it's been trying to say? You may find in those moments that the ache you feel is proof you're still capable of longing. And longing means hope. It means there's still something in you reaching out toward connection, toward meaning, toward life. That is not weakness. That is the most human thing about you. So, the next time night falls and the loneliness begins to stir, try this. Instead of asking, "How do I make this stop?" ask, "What is this telling me?" Light a candle. Write a few words. Let the quiet be a companion instead of a threat. You might discover that, while loneliness hits hardest at night, it can also reveal the deepest truths about who you are and what you need. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find that the quiet hours are not just a space of emptiness, but a doorway, one that leads you closer to yourself and closer to the kind of connection you've been searching for all along.